Hi everyone, welcome to Reline Live today. I am actually in the great state of Maine, joined by Don LeBlanc as well as Travis Stearns. We are getting a contractor's perspective of relining today. So this will be interesting. We've never actually got to have a contractor join us, let alone have I ever got to do a Reline Live in person. So thanks guys, this will be fun. We're gonna have a very open dialogue today. As usual, you guys are going to get to answer questions, or excuse me, ask questions, and we're going to be answering them in real time. If someone could, because this is kind of our first time doing it in person, could you chat with me that the sound is okay and that you guys can hear us all right? Because I have my sound muted from the back end. Okay, I got somebody to say they can hear. Great, thank you guys. So yeah, use the question box or the chat box. We'll be taking questions in real time. We've had a bunch of people who've registered. We've got engineers, DOTs on the call, counties, thank you for joining, who have already submitted some questions for Travis, and we're probably going to blindside him with a few, so bear with us, Travis.
Yeah.
Thanks for being the first contractor willing to do this. Okay, so let's get started. What are some of your favorite culvert situations to get into? And this is more just for me to kick things off from a contractor's perspective. Is there something about certain diameters you enjoy, certain amount of lengths of relining that you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I like the larger diameter stuff that's got, anything a little more difficulty trying to figure out how you're going to get them in, just not straight shots. With the larger diameter, there's a lot of different options. The bypass is usually a little more difficult, but you have more room to work, and there's a lot that goes with the reline, the grouting, everything. There's a lot of stuff in your way, so the large diameter gives you more opportunities to figure those solutions out a little bit. Okay. And just get the creative ones. A little bit of a challenge, I guess.
The creative ones?
Yeah, I kind of like, it's something with a challenge. It's a little different, it depends too, different product, different on the situation, on whatever the project is, but the large diameter seems to be where we like to go if we can.
Yeah.
It's nice to not be hunched over in small pipes all the time.
So Don, for you, I mean, I know you're not a contractor installing, but you're out there looking at these jobs and helping engineers and municipalities decide what are the fun ones that you get to work on.
Yeah, I'm with Travis on that. I really appreciate the unique ones, the ones that are, partially already failed or might require some, a little bit more brain power to figure out how to solve them. As we talked last time, you and I were together, actually going to look at these culverts and inspecting them, putting your eyes on these culverts and getting down in and looking and figuring out almost like a detective how you're going to solve that challenge, I think is where Travis was headed with that, and really finding a solution that meets the structural and the hydraulics as best as possible.
Okay. Maybe something that like they don't think can be done, and you get there and like, oh yeah, no, we can do it. Right. This is how we're gonna do it, instead of just it can't be done. We gotta dig it up.
Yeah. So sorry not to be distracting. You guys are gonna see me looking at my laptop as you're talking sometimes, because there are questions coming in and I'm fielding them as we're talking. We do have a lot of people on the call today, so thank you guys so much for joining. This is probably one of our largest Reline lives yet, which always seems to be when I'm with Don.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Okay, so on that, you mentioned something, Travis, about bypass. I'm not overly familiar with bypass, but what are some of the issues you see around bypass specs then in the culvert world when you're doing reline projects?
Yeah, I mean, we travel, all around New England stuff, and every state has their own, there's different situations with different states. Some of the states, what I've been running into a lot is they're really trying to feed into the gravity feed bypasses and situations like that, where it makes it pretty difficult to do some of this work. It just takes up too much room. I don't find it as effective, but some of these, depending on the diameter of the pipes, with the the flow you have to maintain, it takes up too much room. And if you most of these reline, especially anything we got to get in and do the work inside, you can't get in there and move. You can't do any of the work needed to be done with these gravity feed lines.
So give an example, like if you're in a 60-inch and you've got to put a 48-inch liner in there, but then you've got a 24-inch gravity bypass being there, you can't get in.
No, you can't. So it'd have to be a project where you would have to do everything from the from the ends. You wouldn't be able to do. In some projects, you can do that. You can do everything from. You don't need to get in there,
Sure.
But there's a lot of projects you can't. It's more it's a better product when you get in there on these bigger ones and do the work.
Sure.
From the inside.
You mean to have a complete bypass?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, some of it you can do, and that's the other thing. Some areas are allowing, because some of this stuff just has to be done in the wet parts of it, you know, as long as you're not in some states,
Yeah.
some areas aren't allowing anything in the wet. So you have to have the right situation where, you know, you can bypass completely without being in the way too. So it takes a, you know, situation where it's not that, you know, like if you're going across 95, you can't just dig a bypass pipe across, you know,
Right.
95. So you gotta, if you don't have room in there to keep the bypass in, say the liners are too tight, becomes a bit of an issue. So you'd have to, like, theoretically, we'd do a little, you know, bypass, do the work needed to be for clean work, and you'd pull the bypass, put the liner in, then put the bypass back through again, as a lot of preferred when it comes to that. Sometimes, you know, I've run into it where there's nothing in the wet. Once you start, you know, everything's in the dry, and it gets a little more difficult. The site has to be able to take that.
So talk about Red Brook a little bit, since we have that on the screen here. Hopefully you guys can see that.
It's on the screen behind us. Yeah. Mhm.
So talk about that situation, how you had to, because that was under.
Yeah, this was
95.
a job in South Portland, Maine, where it was under 95, and bypass was a little, because nothing was allowed in the wet there, and luckily here it was it was an elliptical pipe going in. We had some room, but the bypass had to go in and out. I think we put in bypass lines in and out probably 4 times. You know, the different stages we had to do to keep it dry. We'd have to, you know, we had to clean it first because there's a lot of debris in it. So we had to run bypass through, clean the pipe, pull bypass, put bypass back up in the ceiling, and everything's in the dry. You're just swapping bypasses back and forth. There was a lot of bypass work on that for.
And there was quite a bit of technical term muck in there too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, so it had to be like, we couldn't just go in and put it above
right.
because we couldn't get in there and do the work. So we had to go hang one, clean the pipe, get it prepped for a liner, put new bypass pumps and new bypass lines up on the overhead,
Right.
swap the bypass, pull the bypass out, and do our work inside.
Sure.
And then pull the bypass back out of the ceiling, get it back through the new liner while we do our grouting.
Right. Because in this situation, you're never going to put your bypass across north and southbound on I-95.
No, there's utilities. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just a cost too. I mean, you could bore it across, I guess, but there's
Right.
utilities everywhere, there's, you know, structures, and
Sure.
it was really the only option. And that site allowed some room in the top. You don't always have that room in the top, so that couldn't have been done if it was tighter.
Yep.
Okay. So what is this picture we're looking at?
So that's the last bypass change on the Red Brook project that we were just talking
Okay,
about.
okay.
So we had pulled it out of the ceiling already and probably just grouted, and this is the head wall we had to do for it. But the bypass, this was the last section of it going through the liner pipe to do the grouting and the head wall work on it.
Okay.
Yeah, it came out great, that wall. This is the upstream end?
So now that you mentioned grouting, obviously that's a question we get a lot, and we've had some questions come in about grout. You being a contractor, having done this for how many years now, Travis? Sorry, I guess introduce you to everybody on your experience.
I mean, essentially 18 years. I really started when I was in high school. At the end of it, kind of just toying around with the slip lining.
Right. So background on you, you come from a family-owned business, though, of contractors who've been doing this for decades.
Yeah, my grandparents had a excavation company. You know, that's our background. That was my background, and we still do some of it. But yeah, I think it's 44 years now in business. So
Okay.
that was our main until about I kind of started going into that Reline direction slowly, you know, in the early ages. But then really from the last 10 years, it's really where I put all my most of my focus to.
Okay.
And a lot of the guys we have, that's what they've been, you know, exclusively doing as the Reline for.
Yeah, you
12 years
early
probably.
2000s, you kind of started getting into it, and then
Yeah,
were heavily
and we
involved.
kind of like we toured. I still did the excavation we did, and then probably I'm gonna say 07, 08 is when we really started pushing more into that direction, and then since 2010 is when I've put pretty much most of the resources we can towards
Okay,
that.
cool. Yeah, so that's a little bit of background on Travis, you guys. So I missed that in the beginning, so you all knew his experience. I was so excited to have a contractor. I didn't even tell you who he was. So on the grout questions we get a lot is, what are the benefits of using, I mean, I know you guys, both of you are very attached to low density cellular grout. So what are the benefits? Why do you guys love that product so much?
You want to answer that first?
Yeah, I mean, I try to pretty much strictly use lightweight cellular concrete.
Yeah.
I mean, there's instances where sometimes, I'll use something for a little, a portion of it, but I like it in the Reline because I can control. I mean, we're getting the strengths, the densities we need better than, conventional backfill or anything like that. And I can put it wherever I want. It's one thing when you're on a 60-foot cross culvert, but these runs now we're doing are 400 to 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
You can go in, you're moving, you got to get it into the voids. It's extremely pumpable. Goes where you want it, put it where you want it, doesn't overload the pipe, and it'll travel. Some of these voids, when you do these, you can have a 8-inch gap on one side, but maybe there's only a 2-inch void where you're filling, and it'll push through, and it doesn't like a full fill or a standard. It'll overload. It won't flow. It'll pile and go, then it'll overload. And these liners, it's pretty easy to move them around, especially when you're not flowing it to where evenly on each side. Doesn't overload. Less lift force.
Right.
Mhm.
A lot less pressure on the pipe. There's just a lot of benefits, and it gives you everything you need.
So one comment we're getting is that they can't see the photos on behind us because of the lighting.
Hey,
So I'm wondering if we want to have you log in and just share your screen so they can see the photos in a bigger format.
can try that. Yeah.
You'll just keep yourself muted so we don't get that echo on the audio.
Okay. Let me work on that. And I guess while I'm doing that, I'll answer that from my perspective and extend on what Travis was saying as well, is that we, with the lightweight cellular concrete, we are absolutely gaining the compressive strengths that we need. We're basically just replacing backfill, right? So what that's led to is, actually, do you mind if can you find that?
Sure.
I think you have it right here.
Yep.
So
Join now.
So basically what we're doing is we're just replacing a soil backfill with lightweight cellular concrete. Flowable fill, while it will work for a lot of liners, it's, as he mentioned, very hard to pump because it has such a high sand quantity in it.
Yeah.
And it weighs about 135 pounds per cubic foot. The cellular concrete that we're using only weighs about 30 to 40 pounds per cubic foot. And on the average, at 28 days, we'll cure to about anywhere from 100 to 300 PSI, which is way above any well compressed. So I need to mute myself, right?
Yeah. I gotta turn your audio. There you go.
Okay.
No audio, and then I'm gonna have you share your screen.
Okay.
So I will do that right now. Change presenter. And then you can share those pictures. So then that should be better for you guys. We can just keep, we'll keep the webcam going, but then you guys can see the photos. There you go. Let me know if that's better. You guys keep using the questions or chat box. I'm on both. So we've had someone say that audio's cutting in and out for him in particular.
For Travis.
Oh, Mark said much better. Okay.
Okay.
Mark, let me know if that sound, if that's working. Maybe we just need to speak a little louder.
Sure.
We'll see.
So continuing on the cellular grout, in this particular instance, and Travis, you can definitely extend upon what I'm telling him, but Travis had the opportunity to work in New Hampshire, up in the mountains, up in the White Mountains, on a culvert that was about 1,100 feet long. And this culvert was particularly challenging because it changed slope 2 to 3 times, right? And I think at one point it was as steep as maybe 11 to 12%.
Yeah, I think it was 12. I think.
So he had some unique challenges in the sense that you had to do this grout, and obviously everything wants to flow downhill, so you have to control the lifts so you don't either float the liner or damage the liner.
Right.
Which could happen no matter what type of liner you use, whether it's metal or HDPE. So that was one of the huge concerns that he had.
The other thing too is like with the on a job like that, because you brought that one up. I mean, it's a long distance. Sometimes you're talking hundreds of feet before you even get to your application spot where you want to be, and full fill doesn't work well like that. It's one thing if you can plug right into the end and you're just filling the best you can. Full fill is okay with that. But like you're stopping, like he's saying, when it's a place you have lifts, you can't just hammer it into the pipe. You got to stop, move, and the full fill. I mean, it's just a struggle. Every time you stop is a chance for a clog with full fill in your lines. You're not wrestling 60 feet of line, you're wrestling 800 feet of line. And the cellular just, you can pick up, move, keep moving your way wherever you want to go in the pipe, put it where you want it, and you don't have those issues.
So what are some downfalls of cellular?
Good question.
You know, I know that I was at a job site in Portland, Oregon, very first week of September, and the contractor there, well, it was the only option for this pipe. I mean, there's no other way because he was pushing uphill, up a slope, so he needed that. But he had a lot of laterals that it was definitely seeping out of the laterals because the engineer didn't want him to plug laterals. So I know that that was a frustration, was it can go everywhere. It finds all the voids. So is that a negative, or is that actually, is that good?
Well, yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I think that would probably happen with any material that's going to flow to those areas and going to
Okay.
leak in those a little
It
bit.
would have found them.
Yeah, it would have. But I mean, that's kind of the point of, in a reline situation, is you want to fill all those voids anywhere it can go. That's the point. But we're trying to make this 100% structural as possible.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Like you run into a lot of times like different DOTs, and they spec these jobs where they want you to go in and just patch the little holes everywhere. You know what I mean? And I don't agree with that.
Pre-patch
Yeah,
them.
pre-patch it before you go in line and grout. And I don't agree with that because you can't, the best way to fill those in almost a pressure grout situation is to actually like seal the ends the best you can. So, you know, blowing out head walls, blowing out riprap ends, or whatever your situation is, but fill those when you're filling the pipe. You got the head pressure, you got everything, you're moving it along. Leave those voids so you can fill them with the lightweight cellular concrete. That's what I try to do anywhere I can,
Okay.
just because it's getting them all.
Yeah, in certain instances, I can think of one down in the mid-Atlantic states I did last year where we put in some 108-inch diameter HDPE under the railroad, and prior to actually sliplining the pipe, when we did use lightweight cellular concrete, but prior to sliplining the pipe, we talked with the owner about cutting little windows in the hose pipe wherever they just sounded for voids, and they could hear some voids underneath the haunch areas.
Oh.
So they just basically cored a little bit, 3x3 or like a 4x4 hole in the hose pipe, so that when you do the process of grouting it, then it actually spills in behind and fills some of that underneath the haunch area where the backfill's been washed away over the years.
Mhm.
And we will do that sometimes. Like if we know there's a pretty good void, we'll help promote that in. We'll go in, we'll cut, sections out anywhere it is, and just let the cellular do its job.
Okay.
There is like, sometimes like even in Portland, like say groundwater is a really big issue, sometimes it is. Usually we can get rid of it, but say if there's like right on the bottom, it's completely chowdered, I'm afraid that there might be an issue. We can't get that. So sometimes maybe what I'll do is I'll use like a real high strength full fill, like a ton of cement, maybe even some anti-water, and just put a skim small lift in there.
Yep.
And that's as far as I'll go if I think I can get it with that. Like I don't want to, because it's just like he was saying. It's a big difference in the Reline when you're talking 130 pounds, 120 pounds cubic foot compared to 35, 40.
Right.
It's a lot of strain. It's more than you would think. Really.
But on the short runs, you can use a heavier grout.
Oh yeah.
When you're doing 60-foot runs, right? And it also depends on how much void you
Well,
have.
and yeah, I wouldn't recommend like, if you say it's just a situation, you have a small pipe and you have 3 feet of void, I wouldn't recommend just hammering a bunch of full fill to it. You still get your heat, especially like HDP, or you still get your heat hydration, all those problems that you can come in with. And it's more of a weight, heat hydration. It's gonna move it around for sure.
Yeah, so for those on the call that are familiar with, some of our do-it-yourself liners, if you may, like a snap tight HDP solid wall pipe, we often promote self-performance of culvert lining. If we're working with a public works department or a DOT maintenance yard, we'll often talk to them about self-performing a liner soup to nuts. So that's pushing the liner, building the bulkheads, and grouting. And how do we do that? Oftentimes it's flow fill right off the back of a ready mix truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, we usually go maybe 50 to 60, pushing it 70 feet, but you need head pressure from a gravity perspective.
Right.
If you're gonna use flow fill, you need some head. A lot of guys will use like an upside down traffic cone and some PVC to self-perform that grout, but you need head, and to Travis's point, you still need to calculate a lift height on those grouts, because that grout, 130 pounds cubic foot times 4 feet ahead is a lot of uplift, a lot of pressure. So you still need to do your lift checks on a flow fill, and the cellular allows you to do more at a time because it's not as much pressure on that pipe.
And there's some different products out there too in the flow. I mean, slurry wise and stuff that'll run better. You're not gonna, the weight per cubic foot's gonna stay heavy,
Right.
but there is some things out there you can do to make some of those, like in a situation where, I mean, if you're just doing a small cross culvert and they want to self, and they have some products out there that'll run better for you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're a little more money, like, you know, than just a standard flow fill, but it's gonna run.
And that's the key, is flow, right?
Right. So we mentioned Snap Tight,
Mhm.
which you and I have had a Reline Live, I believe, around Snap Tight.
Yeah.
But Travis, your perspective as a contractor, and then we'll get Don's perspective, you know, as an engineer, which is nice to have both of your perspectives.
Sure.
But you have to go on the field and install this. You know, he goes and helps spec it.
Right.
What, in your opinion, is the pipe that connects the easiest, it's easiest to slide in? Do you feel like there's one product, or is it just varies?
I mean, as an installer, I do them all.
Yeah.
So whatever they're putting out, I'll put in.
Right.
And luckily we have a lot of experience with all of them. So everyone has, you know, it depends on the situation, you know, it's one product just, you know, so say Snap Tight. Snap Tight's a great, easy product, but, you know, anything larger than that, you know, we go to a wheel light traditionally, or, you know, it's whatever fits best. Metal, you know, a lot of DOTs are putting quite a bit of metal on the ground too. And
Metal liners, though.
Yeah.
Not
Oh, yeah.
they're not ripping and replacing. They're just putting a new metal liner inside.
yeah, I mean, we've done,
Mostly an existing metal liner, and using metal now as a Reline product.
oh yeah, we've done tens and tens of thousands of feet of it.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've done enough of it so that the joining of that, you know, we have systems and we've got it down there. I don't know if I'd say one's really better, because every situation is different. Some are easier, you know, some are easier to do in the wet, like if it needed to be, you know, you can do in the wet. Some you can't really do in the wet. But I can't really think I mean.
And Dawn?
Well, it's all, I think what Travis is getting at, it's all situational, right?
Yeah.
In certain instances, it's hydraulics governs over, I think in most instances,
Yeah.
hydraulics governs over structural. All of the solutions that we talk about are all AASHTO approved, right? So they're all structural to begin with. So for most of the time, we're not having to check that box because it's already checked. So hydraulics really becomes the governing design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, as far as connectivity and how well the bells and the joints need to go together, there's just different nuances between how you assemble a corrugated metal pipe liner versus HDPE liner. You know, in the case of Snap Tight, like you see here, this was a county highway group that put in 300 feet of 54-inch with their own forces, and they're snapping the pipe all outside of the hose pipe. So you can push 300 feet, and this was all uphill at a 3% grade.
Yeah.
So they did a fantastic job. So, you know, you're doing all the work outside of the hose pipe, which keeps the guys safe. They're off the road. In this case, I think you guys probably saw me flip through, but when I arrived, that was the situation, right? So there's a sinkhole in the middle of the road, and there's 18 feet of depth between the pavement and the top of the hose pipe. So they literally pushed 300 feet all the way from the outlet up and did a fantastic job. They had it done in less than a week. And then Travis's crew went in and grouted it for them.
Okay.
So I think it's just situational, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we all come in, is looking at a job and figuring out, okay, well, you might have option A, B, and C, and here's how you would approach each one.
And the thing is well, you know, and whether or not, depending on the situation, what products there, you know, can we use here? Like, is there an issue? Like, does it have to be corrugated? Does it have to be? Because some situations, like we're saying here, you know, you're doing, that's like a solid wall is the most forgiving pipe too. And if you say you have bends, you have anything, it's by far the most forgiving. You know, if you're going around bends, you got deflections, you got anything, the chances are way better, smoother than say you're on a corrugated going through those bends. You're rubbing corrugation to corrugation, metal. It's not the best situation when it comes to something like that, but
That job in the other Portland, from where I'm at now,
other
the
Portland,
other
yeah.
Portland, the other side of the country that I went to was 1,500 feet of snap tight, but it was engineer and spec to be snap tight or a PVC liner.
Sure.
And I mean, I know all of you probably haven't seen the testimonial, but I did put it on LinkedIn. I interviewed the project manager and said, would PVC have worked on this job? Obviously, I gave my argument why snap tight was the best product because it is forgiving and there were bends. And he said, once we looked at the project, we knew that you were right. And he's like, we probably would have walked off the job site if this had been PVC because there were more deflections than they realized,
Right.
In the engineering report. And it would not have been forgiving when they got hung up and had to pull back a little bit. He's like, we would have broken things.
It's brittle, it's
yeah.
strong, but it's not made to, where you run into something, it's more apt to essentially blow up,
Yeah.
than dig, bend, it'll go through, very forgiving. And then you're talking.
And there's a time and place, I think, for that pipe, but.
Everything has
Right.
its time and place, not that, obviously. I'm not gonna sit here because if I don't do that product, I'm trying not to be biased, but every product has their own place and their own strength for it. But
Right.
Yeah. And this particular company, the Emery and Sons, and they put in all liner pipes, so they weren't necessarily, you know what I mean? But for that job, I thought that was interesting. Once he got out to the site and said, yeah, this was the easiest product for the job.
And sometimes there is a clear favorite, like it happens.
Oh,
You
yeah.
get there and like, this is really the only product to use here.
Oftentimes when we're putting in corrugated, it's aquatic life, it's some sort of fish passage, satisfying
Mhm.
the EP or the environmental entity that's in charge. But again, it all goes to situational, as you described, dings, deflections. You're 800 feet that way, and you don't have another entry point until another 200 feet up the. You gotta basically be able to. And then that's it. I mean, another one of the benefits of snap tight, you can push and pull on that pipe.
Mhm.
It's a mechanical joint without having to fuse it, right? So again, it's completely case by case.
Yeah, and we have a good question that just came in about HDPE.
Sure.
How do you deal with the expansion and contraction of solid wall HDPE in a Reline application? Do you typically order an extra foot or two to combat that issue?
That's a good question. And Army Corps, of all people, they've got kind of a unwritten rule, which we usually will we'll offer another 6 to 12 inches of pipe to combat that expansion.
Right.
In some instances where there's a valve or something or some sort of slide gate, like on a dam or a control structure, we'll actually cut it short a little bit to allow for that growth so that the slide gate will still go down, right?
Okay.
And that's actually something that Army Corps has used as well. So as a general rule of thumb.
Okay.
But yeah.
And we recommend that. I do recommend when I am talking to contractors to order a foot on each side just to be safe.
Right.
If you want to be really safe, give yourself a couple extra feet on each side just in case. You can always cut it off.
I will say, once you're in the ground in a culvert, the expansion contraction, because it's all about ambient temperatures and what causes that pipe to grow and shrink, right? It came off the pavement at 100 degrees and it went in the ground at 60 or what have you, right? So in many instances, once it's in an ambient temperature, it's had a chance to acclimate is the word I'm looking for, then that concern decreases often.
And you can run into instances sometimes where, say it's a long run of HDP and the grouting's quite a bit, you know what I mean? So you're putting those lifts and you're putting the heat to it, right? Cools, you're putting the heat to it. It can, you can get a little bit of movement there. So, but like what you're saying, you try and get all that taken care of before you, say you have a bevel on the inlet or something you're doing. Yep. Try and leave the finish work for once everything kind of settles out.
Many folks like New York, I can think of right now, New York DOT, they'll actually restrain one end of the pipe by actually putting J hooks. And they won't restrain both, right? So you leave, I think typically they just restrain the outlet, if I'm thinking about that correctly. They'll come up halfway up the pipe at the spring line and they'll just anchor it in and throw some threaded rod in there and some nuts in there and lock it down and then let the other end move if it ever had to.
Okay.
But
That's
so
smart.
New York DOT has a spec for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question for you, Travis, that came in was, how do you know a pipe needs to be relined? Like when you're looking at them, when you're going out with a potential customer, when do you deem it necessary?
Well,
Because they trust you, right? I mean, same with Dawn, same with I. If one of our customers come to us and we're gonna go do pipe inspections, there's a time and place that we're just gonna say, I think you got 5 more years on this pipe, or you might have 10 more years on this pipe. When you're like, no, this pipe needs to be fixed.
yeah.
And sooner rather than later, in a lot of situations, we end up on emergency jobs.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Quite a
Because
bit.
they waited and budgeted.
Well,
it and
that's
pushed
the
it.
whole key when it comes to the Reline. Like the key is you gotta get in that time frame before when it's a Reline candidate, and then too late to Reline.
Do we have some pictures of that, Dawn?
You know, it's too late. The only option is to
Some
dig it up.
culverts. I mean, I know I do. Just some of those kind of.
Yeah, let me pull something up. For a second.
Yeah, I mean, we can expand on that.
Yeah, no, and it's the whole trick here, because once it gets, because a lot of what you're pushing with the Reline is you're trying to save, you're trying to save disruption, you're trying to save money in most cases, and you got to get it before it gets to that point, because once it gets to the point, then you're no return, and you're at that, you're spending more money, you got to dig it up.
Well, like a telltale sign is if you start to see slippage of the asphalt on the side of the road.
Sinkholes are the,
Yeah.
like it's a
And
real.
even if it doesn't look like it's a sinkhole yet, it's just the asphalt starting to crumble kind of a little bit down the side.
So
Could be a sign though, right?
yeah,
And that's-
typically because I'm looking for it kind of. I'll see a sinkhole and I'll pull over. Like, there's either an invert gone or there's joints gone. Classic concrete pipe, the joints gone. And it's just washing out from there. Like 9 out of 10 times you see a sinkhole somewhere on the road, there's a drainage structure, there's a drainage pipe somewhere
Okay.
leaking, like it's getting some loss of backfill material.
Right.
So everyone on Reline Live, since we have so many of you right now, start pulling over when you see sinkholes, documenting them, take pictures, send them to us, tell them where they're at.
I mean, it's crazy too. Like I've had some where you see a little start of a sinkhole in a project and the hole's bigger than I could fit my truck in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's a major road. We're driving over every day and there's huge voids.
Yeah, I mean, it's in our nature, right, to go look at these culverts, and we kind of nerd out about it from time to time. But when you actually not just look at the ends, you stick your head down, you look, you're looking from the stream from up above. You can kind of see what's going on, but it really behooves owners to actually look inside the pipe and look down through, get a flashlight, get a tape measure, obviously do it safely. But this is one recently I looked at where you're past, in my opinion, can we still line that? Absolutely. But this is like the 11th hour, right? And we all know, being in the industry, that permitting is often the most time-consuming aspect, right? Because it's got to go through a review and what have you, so that they can permit it. And in that instance, I mean, I've got owners who literally, they know they have a problem, they want to fix it. By the time it's permitted, it's 12 to 18 months down the road, and it's too late because the road's gone.
It's going away.
So, I recently had a client that said, Don, I want to get into a maintenance program where I can get ahead of the curve. I know I've got these issues with these 4 culverts, what have you, and they might have 2-3 years left in them. I don't know, right? At any given moment, we get a big storm, all of a sudden the culvert's gone,
Washed out,
right?
yeah.
You get some of these hurricanes that have
We
come
have
up
some
this way.
interesting videos of culverts literally washing out
Right.
and the road collapsing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, here in New England, we had Irene, we had Lee, we had a couple of hurricanes that really came up and did some damage up through along the East Coast, even as far north as we are here, right? And it just completely eradicated these culverts. So here, this is one that absolutely, I believe, that you guys see on your screen. It's still lineable, but this is, your question was perfect, right? It's when do you know it's time to do something? This is like the exaggerated case. So, and to your point, Trav, there's a massive sinkhole that's already been backfilled.
Yeah.
That one.
It's just going to keep coming until you fix the problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and perfect example, this picture. So Don, you and I, a couple of weeks ago when I was in Maine, I just love it out here, so I just keep coming. This is it's the plates are slipping, right? So, right? I'm looking at this correctly.
So this is old riveted pipe, and what's happened here is the plate's completely, it's not actually plate, it's corrugated metal. but it's actually separated from itself on both sides. And I measured it.
Oh, so it's not a liner plate.
It's
Okay.
no longer a pipe. It's essentially a disconnected, there's no longer a circular structure here.
Yeah.
It's a mushroom shape when you think about it.
Yep.
Each one of those sides, you can see my tape
I can
measure,
see your tape measure. Yeah.
separated 5 inches, the entire length of the culvert, not just like 12 inches long.
Yeah.
It's all the way down through the culvert.
Yeah.
So it's no longer a pipe gets its strength from being a circle. It's no longer that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, we look at these as often as we can, but it's, I mean, helpful for, I think, a lot of you guys on the call. Like I said, we have a mix on the call of engineers,
Right.
contractors. We have some municipality and counties on here. Call us. We're happy to come look at them and walk them with you. We do that on our own just for fun when I come visit.
Right.
So we're happy to do it for work. Some of the new products. So when I got into this industry, I'm very green and I don't deny it. So I learn a lot from all of you guys who've been doing it a lot longer. You know, I came into it doing solid wall mechanical joints, snap together, snap tight type of pipe. And since then have expanded my knowledge on tons of other Reline products that didn't know existed because I got started just really kind of on that segmental liner focus.
Right.
So and Snaptight's been around a really long time. You guys have been doing it for years. What are some other really cool, unique new product, or maybe new to us, that we're starting to bring into our portfolio, or you're starting to see installed now, Travis, that you weren't installing 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, some of them have been around, maybe utilizing them a little more now. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, like I said before, you know, I'm a segmental liner. That's pretty much what I've always done.
Yeah.
So, you know, my standard tools were always, in the HDP side, was always, you know, a snap tight, a wheel light,
Yep. Same.
because that was really the only options we had. And, you know, the wheel light with the large diameter, you know, we can ovalize, we can get in some different situations where you can utilize that. Different metals have become bigger. You know, we've done more tunnel liner plate in the last few years just
Okay.
because of the, you can do a ton with it, you know, you can actual tunnel with it like it's made to be if need to be.
Don has a picture, I think, of tunnel liner.
No, this is the next product.
No, this is, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
But, you know, like say a tunnel liner plate does, you know, say you have it's not even just that you have to tunnel your way, but you only have, say you have a dissipator or something, or a structure in the beginning, and you only have 2 feet to work with,
Okay.
then you can, you know, you're bringing down 18-inch sections even and bringing the rings down in, or you're going right in because the accessibility is just not very good. Like the Hearts location one we did, plenty of room in the pipe, but it had a huge energy dissipator in the front. I think we had 38 inches to get underneath, so you had to get underneath and it opened it up to like a 9 by 11 or something pipe inside, but
You had to duck,
but
literally.
you couldn't
duck
get
under
anything
it.
under it because it was dissipators on both ends.
Wow.
But the next product that's fairly new and hopefully make some traction is actually what he has on here now, and it's a channel line product because they have a lot more options. Like he's saying here, you can do, you know, a box.
Yep.
We can do the shapes, hopefully, you know, something like that on candidates that you couldn't line before. I think this will allow DOTs, municipalities to say, you know, realize, okay, we can do it because this product will, I mean, there's a lot of endless, what you can't do with regular stick pipe, you know, like in the HDP, you can't do some
Customize
of
it to
these.
any shape.
Yeah, like,
You can't just say, here's exactly the shape we need.
yeah,
With Channel Line, it's one of the new products that at least I've been representing, that you can say, if we have the oddest egg shape, whatever, we can make this work.
and like I said, every product has their own, like their spot where it's needed,
Mhm.
or some better than others, but I think this one's gonna widen that range of things that we couldn't do before, now we can.
Yeah, and unique shapes for sure. And
Well,
you
yeah.
have a couple of really cool pictures of unique shapes on there.
Yeah, no pun intended. We were literally trying to stick a round peg into a square hole previously, right? Like,
Yeah.
where, you know, I'd get calls from municipalities or DOTs where, you know, hey, I've got this 3 by 10 box culvert, you know, 3 foot tall by 10 foot rise. Can I stick, you know, 3 pipes side by side? And the answer is yes, but what are you doing there? You're creating a debris clog, right? The trees and stuff can get stuck on, and you're dramatically reducing your hydraulic area, right, at the inlet. Okay, we could stick 3 snap tights side by side in this box culvert, but I think ultimately it behooves us to tell the client that's not the best solution. And up until, maybe 12 months ago, not knowing this was available, we can now tell DOTs and municipalities that there are solutions for boxes and tight corner radius pipe arches. How many times have you and I looked at a CMP pipe arch, which has already started to squash under load,
Yeah.
and now it's no longer really the definable pipe arch that it once was 20 years ago,
And we
30
can't
years ago.
pipe enough to make it work hydraulically.
And I mean, in a situation like this, size-wise, it really you're our only option until something like that. I mean, some you can do some mobilized HDP, but you can't maximize the waterway.
Flow, yeah.
So really, the only option was metal, back and metal.
Right.
So to get your waterway opening to where you need, and this allows you to have something. If they're looking,
And we have a
something
smooth
other than
surface
metal.
on the inside of this. We can
We
put
can.
fish baffles. I've talked. So we recently at TV Pipe just brought on channel line as another solution for our customers.
Mhm.
So I kind of went through the product training on it a few weeks ago and learned we can do fish baffles because that's a big thing in Oregon, Washington, Idaho. We've got a lot of fish lovers.
Also, they can you can rough the surface up to
Yeah,
slow
and you
down.
need it for-
Yeah.
especially because we're coming down a lot of mountains, big
Oh, yeah.
mountains, and so we got to slow down the flow. But yeah, so there's a lot of cool things we can do with this pipe.
It goes back to what we were talking about, 30 minutes ago about looking at jobs. Like their very first question is,
Yeah.
how do you solve unique challenges? And they're the fun ones. Like, so for instance, he and I are looking at one right now where, they want to get more water into the pipe, get the headwater down so you don't overtop the road at the inlet, right? But then slow it down at the outlet by reducing the velocities. How do we do that? Well, one possibility is you put an improved entrance on the pipe, and then you put some sort of roughening element or baffles at the end of the pipe.
Dissipators.
So you
Dissipators.
dissipate the energy at the outlet, almost like a scour pad, but within the pipe.
Yep.
Right. So that's one of the very unique things. I mean, we can do it with this solution, with this product. We can do it with other products, and we can also combine different things, right?
Yeah.
You could do like a waylight followed by like a tunnel liner plate to reduce the velocities again, right? Just something flanged or whatever. But there's a lot of unique things you can do.
Travis, you can probably install dissipators right on site if you need to. You
Oh
can
yeah,
just weld
yeah,
them right on,
yep.
right?
We've done it many times.
Yeah.
Obviously any HDP, we can build anything. Like I always tell people, like if you can do it with wood, you can do it with HDP.
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we had a contractor in Colorado just do the spec was every 2 feet he needed dissipator strips.
Yeah, and we've done that, and just like baffles where it's only at high flows. You leave the bottom if you're just looking to try and slow that energy down on high flow conditions. Like you can do those baffles. You can leave the normal flow open,
Mhm.
and then so you leave the normal flow waterway open, and you put the dissipators up the side or the top, so it's only when it's high flow conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got like 3 more questions on our list. What's your take on CIPP liners? This was a question that one of our municipalities asked. Do you feel that they have a place in drainage slip lining? Do you feel they're a structural option? Does the waterway opening and invert change with CIPP? Like, does it overpower the non-structural and lack of void filling? That was a very long question, but I'm trying to read the whole question.
Well, it comes up quite a bit, and like
Yeah.
like I say, I'm a segmental liner, so I mean, obviously, I try not to be too biased. Like I think every product has its situation. There's times when I've hired cured in place guys to come do on my projects where it was a better fit. What happens, we're running into a lot of times. What we're running into is you're completely up against the flow, the waterway opening, and seems like sometimes it's over topping is it structural, or not? I don't see how from my side on some of these, the arch pipes or anything that's not round in the host is, I don't see how it is structural personally, or how any benefit from, say, some of these pipes, like we were talking about earlier, we have all those voids, these big voids everywhere. You're not taking care of those at all with that.
Right.
But I see why sometimes they're up against it and they just they can't change the waterway opening, very minimally. You're talking, you go in there with a liner, you UV or what, you cured in place, you're minimally changing it, but it's not fixing any of the structural problems, I don't think.
Well, I would add that for me, I think cured in place, everything has its place, right? And this is my engineering hat going on. It's when you do a cured in place, oftentimes the culvert, you're talking 12, 24, 36, what have you. And usually they're just treating the inside of the culvert, right? But oftentimes a CIPP project will not include modifications to the inlet. And so, we look at Culvert Solutions as a very holistic approach, right? It's everything from the inlet geometry to the outlet and what's at the outlet for tailwater, if there's any tailwater. And oftentimes when we do a segmental liner, we can modify the entrance geometry. So CIPP, oftentimes you're treating the inside of the pipe, but nothing at either end of it. Typically, that's not always the case, but from what I've seen in the industry up here in the Northeast, it's usually, okay, we're going to put the liner through, but where's the modification at the inlet where a lot of the hydraulics play,
Okay.
right? So for me, I think it's hydraulically, they're trying to do it to maximize their open area, but there's nothing being done to the inlet in many situations.
We see it a lot in the smaller diameters in our area. We don't typically see it a lot in large diameters.
Right.
I think it gets really cost effective, and large diameters really have to be structural.
Oh,
Not that
100%,
small
yeah.
don't, but typically under your big highways and stuff, they're larger diameters and they will slip line versus CIPP. But in our 12-inch, 14-inch, 16-inch, we see a lot of CIPP in the Northwest.
And the reality is, when we say structural, for the folks on the webinar, we're talking about AASHTO, right? It's something that's qualifiably, you can calculate, you have an equation that stands by AASHTO methodology, right? So that's what we call, you and I call, what you call structural, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, so another question. What are some of the most challenging shapes to find lining solutions for? I know we saw a box culvert in there. I know we talked about an arch pipe that's even arched and oval more. Like we saw channel line are there other solutions out there when you get into those odd shapes other than a channel line? Is that?
Do you want me to take that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's, as we mentioned earlier, Travis and I have seen pipes here in the Northeast where they're already failed, right? Obviously there's an extent or a point at which we just say, we got to be honest with the client and say, we cannot line this. Physically, it's impossible. Or if we did it, it would have to be way too far reduced. Like we've looked at a few for a couple of DOTs around here where it's like the 13th hour, right? And it failed already and it's collapsed. So you're literally at that point, you're talking about a true tunneling project or some sort of jack and bore or horizontal, something you're doing a true tunneling. There's no more lining of the culvert happening in some of these instances.
But there are some products outside of channel line that can be a little bit custom shaped.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You and I talked about a rolled steel product
Yep.
today. I mean, there's other things, right? We just have to look at it and figure it out.
Oh yeah.
And see if it's, I would say at least from the stuff that I've seen with you, that I've seen out our direction, 85% of it can be lined with some sort of product.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's, dig and replace is only if it's a last resort and
correct.
You don't care about your road usually, or the railroad, and that's almost never the case.
Or they're just being governed by DEP, something where they're just, which is big up this way. It's trying to be forced. It's a fight for some of these people in the permitting side to get them to line them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I think any geometry, there's really no, with some of the things we talked about today and some of the other offerings out there, there's really no quote unquote geometry that we can't approach. It's a function of it meets the hydraulics and the structural, right?
And sometimes you have, like we were talking earlier, so okay, this is where we are. These are the only options. So you find a couple products, like you say, steel, solid steel, or say that, or the channel line's the only one that can meet that. It's, and it becomes a price point longevity, which if you can meet the waterways with whatever product it is are we looking for the longest lasting pipe we can get here? Are we looking for cost effective?
Yeah. And in some cases we can take steel pipe, corrugated metal pipe, and put certain coatings on it to give it more longevity too.
Oh yeah.
That's something that we've looked at in a couple of our projects.
Polymer coated steels. I mean, we've put in, you know, tens of thousands of feet of it. You know, it's a pretty popular product.
Yeah, especially because it gives the natural fish baffle.
Yeah, you have the corrugations, you
yeah,
know, you have the
yeah.
corrugations,
So
if that's what you're running into. And
yeah.
then a lot of, there's some states that we deal with that's their biggest fight is that.
Yeah.
It's just corrugations. So that's why those products are being pushed more than others.
So Travis, one of the questions that came in is what made you be willing to join Reline Live as a contractor?
It's a trick question. It's not typically, you know, it's out of my comfort zone, that's for sure, but just I guess,
Strong armed them.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was asked to and didn't have the nerve to say no, I guess.
Yeah, and your contractor, Don, and I guess yourself have one project. When I say together, Don's come out and inspect them, and you're
Well,
one of the
yeah,
one
we
of the
just,
contractors
we end
that
up
do.
meeting on a lot of, he's in the same spot I am. He's going after the same things I
Yeah.
am. So like you see, you're at the same spot trying to do the same thing
Yeah,
on these projects. You know, that's kind of how it came about, really. Like, you know, next thing you know, we see each other the same places because we're both going after the same stuff,
right,
believe in the same solutions.
It's a close knit industry.
exactly.
It's a small,
And so he asked you a favor for me.
And surprisingly, I actually said yes.
Because I've been wanting to get a contractor on Reline Live for a very long time. So this for me was really fun.
Good, me too.
Let me see. Do we have any other questions for Travis before we wrap up? We'll give you guys a few minutes back of the hour. I'll let anyone type them in if you guys have any more questions. That was a good one though. Thank you for asking Travis that. Nope, we're good. Okay, you guys, someone did ask if this was going to be recorded. It is recorded. It will be on my website and on Don's website, probably within 24 hours. We'll have it out to you guys, as well as if you were on or weren't on, there will be a link to the recording in 24 hours when my thank you email comes out. Travis, thanks for being such a good sport.
Thanks for having me, I guess.
I think the only reason you did it is because I was sitting here in person. You couldn't avoid me.
Yeah, pretty much.
Thank you, Don. I had
My
a great
pleasure.
time.
Thank
You
you.
guys, this was a great edition of Reline Live, and we'll send you an email soon with our next one. Have a good afternoon. Go vote.
Thanks, everyone.